You've felt it before. That sudden stillness in the air when even the wind seems to vanish, a moment where the world holds its breath. Not quite fear, but something older, something watching. In Japan, they speak of a presence that visits just before the final breath. It doesn't knock, it doesn't speak, it waits. They call it Shinigami, the spirit of death. Unlike the reapers of Western legend, Shinigami isn't a skeletal figure with a scythe. It doesn't harvest souls, it guides them, quietly, patiently, through the veil that separates life from what comes after. But where did this figure come from? Why does it appear not in temples or scripture, but in shadows and silence? Tonight, we step into that darkness. We trace the whispering footsteps of the Shinigami and follow it to the place where stories end. Unlike many spiritual beings in Japanese folklore, Shinigami wasn't born among the ancient gods. You won't find it in Shinto shrines or classical myths. It came from something far more human and far more tragic. The word Shinigami, literally death god or spirit of death, first emerged during Japan's Edo period, a time of strict order, cultural richness, and quiet suffering. Behind the painted fans and graceful rituals, there were whispered stories. Tales of people who, burdened by debt, disgrace, or despair, chose to end their own lives. And as these acts became more frequent, a question began to haunt the living. Were they truly alone when they died, or had something guided them? In early plays and dark folktales, this something took form. Not a deity, not a demon, but a presence, a companion at the end. The Shinigami was never worshipped, it was feared, but not in the way one fears monsters. It was the fear of being seen in your lowest moment, your final breath, and gently led away. This wasn't a creature of hellfire or punishment. It was born from the spaces between words, from grief too deep to name, from silence too long held. And so while the temples prayed to gods of sun, harvest, and storm, the streets, the alleys, the lonely tatami rooms whispered a different name, Shinigami. The Shinigami may not have come from sacred texts, but it didn't stay hidden for long. Its first appearances weren't in temples or sermons, but on stage. In the flickering candlelight of Edo-era kabuki theaters, audiences watched plays that weren't just performances. They were warnings. One of them was a tale called Shinigami no Monogatari, the tale of the death spirit. It told of a man, down on his luck, who meets a strange figure offering him the power to control death itself. But there's a catch. When the flame of a dying soul's candle goes out, he cannot interfere, not even to save someone he loves. At first, the man becomes rich, even famous, by cheating death for others. Until one day, his own candle begins to flicker. The story ends not with fire, but with silence. He begs, pleads, but the Shinigami does not answer. It simply waits. And when the final breath leaves his lips, he is not taken. He is replaced. He becomes the next Shinigami. This tale, though fictional, touched something ancient and intimate. It painted death not as a brute force, but as a system, a rhythm, where one leaves and another takes their place. Soon, whispers of Shinigami drifted beyond the stage into kaidan, ghost stories told in hushed tones after sunset. People spoke of shadows seen near the bedside of the sick, of figures glimpsed at the edge of bridges, of deaths that felt guided. Not all believed, not all wanted to, but deep down, many wondered, when the end comes, will I be alone, or will someone already be there, waiting? In the quiet spaces where the Shinigami walks, it is rarely alone. Japanese folklore speaks of another kind of presence, restless, lingering, unfinished. These are the Yūrei, wandering spirits of the dead. Not demons, not monsters, just people who couldn't let go. A wife who died with betrayal in her heart, a child lost before their name could be remembered, a soldier still waiting for news that will never come. Yūrei drift between worlds, pulled back by sorrow, vengeance, or love, but they don't always know the way forward. That's where the Shinigami comes in. You see, in some stories, the Shinigami isn't the end, it's the guide. It doesn't drag souls into darkness, it walks beside them, gently parting the veil. In remote mountain villages and coastal towns, there were tales of travelers who saw two shadows walking at dusk, one flickering like a torn memory, the other steady, silent, watching. Locals believed they had seen a Yūrei being escorted by a Shinigami to the place they could not reach alone. Together they form a tragic duet, one unable to leave, the other unable to feel. Yet somehow they understand each other. Both belong to the threshold, the space where farewells echo the loudest. It's said that if you wake at the wrong time in the wrong place and you see someone standing at your window who doesn't blink, doesn't breathe, you should not be afraid. It may only be a Shinigami showing someone the way home. What do you do when the thing you fear is invisible? When it knocks without sound and leaves no footprints behind? In old Japan, people answered not with swords, but with rituals. They believed that death could be reasoned with, or at least delayed. One of the most sacred customs was Makura Kotoba, the pillow word. When someone lay dying, a small dagger or string of sacred beads was placed beside their pillow, not to fight off evil, but to ward away the Shinigami's approach. It was a gesture of protection, of love, of quiet resistance. Others left rice or salt at the doorway, offerings to confuse the spirit, to slow it down. In some households, bells were rung softly through the night, not to wake the dying, but to remind the dead that they were still remembered. In certain villages, if someone passed suddenly or in strange circumstances, the family would eat a symbolic final meal at the place of death. It wasn't just grief, it was negotiation, a way of sharing one last moment, keeping the spirit grounded long enough for peace. These weren't grand ceremonies, they weren't loud, they were intimate. The Shinigami may not have spoken, but these rituals did. They said, "Not yet." They said, "We're not ready." They said, "Please wait." And perhaps sometimes it did. In the West, death is often a thief, a sudden end, a grim figure with a blade. But in Japan, it's different. The Shinigami is not a punisher, not a villain. It doesn't chase or conquer or gloat. It simply waits, calm, patient, unseen. To understand the Shinigami is to understand the Japanese relationship with endings, with silence, with impermanence. In a culture where even cherry blossoms are mourned before they fall, death is not just a moment. It is a season, a passage, a return. And in that passage, the Shinigami is there, not to take, but to accompany. A quiet presence in the corner of the room, a stillness in the final breath, the last companion. When death is too big to face alone, people imagine something beside them, not something cruel, not something cold, but something familiar, something that knows the way. That's why the Shinigami was never worshipped, yet never forgotten. It wasn't born from fear. It was born from need, because in the end, no one wants to walk into the dark alone. We began this journey with a whisper, a name spoken not in temples but in silence. Shinigami, not a god, not a monster, just a shadow, always close, never cruel, a reflection of our deepest truth, that death is not an enemy, but a return. For some, it comes softly in sleep. For others, it arrives between heartbeats, quiet, unnoticed. But for all of us, it comes. And maybe, just maybe, when that final moment arrives, there is someone already waiting. Not to take us away, but to walk beside us one last time. So the next time the wind goes still and the night feels just a little too quiet, listen closely. You might not hear it, but something is listening for you.